Welcome back to the Live Incredibly podcast. In this episode, I am joined by Emily Cook. Emily is a dream expert with a PhD in psychology, so thank you for being here and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining me, Emily.
Thank you for having me.
Honestly, I've been so excited for this one, more than a lot of them I've done so far, purely because it's very rare that we get an expert in dreams. As everyone dreams, well, for the most part, everyone dreams, and everyone has always thought that there's some things that it might mean something, or you can tell the future, or it's a premonition. But to have somebody who has a passion for dreams and analyzes them as a hobby, it's great to get your perspective on some of the questions that I have, which I hope to be general questions that a lot of people have.
Fantastic. I am always so excited to talk about dreams. I think I would talk to anybody about dreams. I talk to people at the bus stop about dreams. I talk to my work colleagues about dreams. Any opportunity to talk about dreams, I'm there.
Well, you're doing the conference coming up soon. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes. So the International Association for Dream Studies is actually, it's a global organization, but traditionally they've held their conferences in the US. So of course it's quite difficult for us over here in Europe. I'm based in Amsterdam to join. So we are incredibly excited. And a lot of my colleagues also working in Amsterdam are incredibly excited that this year it will actually be in the Netherlands.
That's amazing. So when you're asked to talk about dreams, I don't want you to spoil anything yet, but what are your sort of general points that you'd trying to get across?
Okay, so something that I really love about the field of dream work. I've previously worked in other academic fields. My PhD was in neuroscience. So I've worked in different fields of academia. And something that I really love about the field of dream studies is the openness. So the welcoming of both scientific perspectives, but also lived experiences, also artists. It's an incredibly rich and diverse field. So really, when people speak about dreams, you never really know what you're going to get. But my particular interests, so the focus of my interest is actually how we can use dreams to better understand culture. So to understand what's going on under the surface of our society, what isn't being said. So that's my particular focus area. And perhaps going a little bit more narrow even than that, I'm particularly interested in corporate culture. So the kinds of cultures that exist in our workplaces. Um, I'm not sure if you've worked in where you've worked. We haven't had that conversation. But at the moment, especially in big organizations, corporate culture is incredibly important. When the culture is bad, you see terrible leadership behaviors, you see terrible mental health problems. Fundamentally, you see less financial success. So anything that we can do to better understand these cultures and to address root problems is incredibly important.
Awesome. So how do we look at dreams and potentially analyze them to understand root causes on a wider scale?
Okay, so I think that is a huge question. I think that there are as many dream theories as there are, I want to say, even people. Everybody dreams. And perhaps, I know that you said you were excited to speak to a dream expert, so perhaps this won't be a welcome comment from me. But I actually believe that everybody is a dream expert. The fundamental expert of each individual dream is the person that dreamt it. They're the experts. So for me, dream work is really about supporting each other, um, not necessarily as expert and non-expert or patient and non-patient, but really as equals, as two humans who both experience dreams, and working together collaboratively to understand what is that dream, what do we do with it, what was it like to experience that dream.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it does make sense, obviously, and seeing the differences, especially even within, say, therapy, just a waking world talking about your experience. There's no one person who experiences the world in the same way as another. There's no one way into that somebody is going to experience a dream in the same as another. But how are we best to approach looking at our own dreams in a way that we can understand them without judgment or without sort of jumping to conclusions?
So there are all sorts of different kinds of analytical methods, but my favorite method is called the Ullman method. So it was actually developed in New York in the 1960s and the 1970s by a man called Montague Ullman. And he was a psychiatrist and later a psychoanalyst. And indeed, he was the person who explained what I had just explained to you. He was the first person to say, even though I'm a doctor, I'm not the expert. The individual, regular person who had a dream, they are the expert. And you mentioned that now we are waking up to this, that we all have different experiences. So, of course, back in the 70s, that was a hugely controversial thing to say, that actually you don't need to pay someone thousands of dollars, for him, I suppose euros or pounds to us. You just need other human connection, other human support to work with your dreams. They're already yours. You just have to unpack them. And so Ullman set up a series of dream groups, and it was actually a huge fashion, a huge fad in the 1970s in New York to go to these dream groups. And what happened was there would be maybe 8 or 10 people, sometimes strangers, who chose to go to the dream group. And there would be one person, not a leader, but a facilitator. And it was that person's role to help the group to work together. So what would that look like? There would be one person, usually they would take it in turns, so each week a different person would get to be the dreamer. And that dreamer would just explain their dream exactly as they experienced it. Whatever was important to them, that's what they would explain, but in as much detail as possible. And then the other members of the dreams would start their response with this phrase: if that were my dream, this is how I would have experienced it. And in that way, the dream is shared. You feel the dream, you feel what they experienced, you reflect how that reflects your own experiences, what you can pull from that. So whilst keeping the original dreamer as the fundamental owner and the fundamental expert, you as a group you re-experience the dream, and the insight is gathered not by the doctors telling you, okay, you dreamed about fish, and fish mean, I don't know, fish mean fish mean bicycles. I don't know. Well, with a dream dictionary, there isn't someone saying, okay, a tree means that's your grandmother or something. Um, the insight is gathered through the process of questioning, through gentle probing, and through saying, you know what? It's really strange for me that you saw two trees. Why two? Why not three? Why not one? Why did you see two trees? Um, so the group is a reflection. It's a facilitation. That's my favorite. Sorry, that was a very long way around of saying that's my favorite kind of analytical method.
I love it. So do you really go into that much detail when it comes to the analysis of those dreams? Because I know I've heard beforehand it takes a lot of practice, but I'm very much a person, and I'm sure there's many others as well, who they, as soon as they wake up, you don't even realize that you have woken up, that dream is fresh in your mind, and it very quickly starts to fade. I highly doubt I personally would be able to go into that kind of detail of analysis where I could think about how many trees there were or how many individual items there are. I'm very more a person who's focused on characters and people, and
Okay.
I can remember a presence of a person who's in my
Yeah.
dreams, but the details fade away so quickly. So I'll go to my
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend and I'll wake up and I'll say, "Oh, I dreamt about us last night,"
Yeah.
and she'll say, "What was it?" I says, "I'm not sure." I just know that you were there, I was there, and then this person I haven't met yet, but I'm going to be talking to soon on a podcast was there.
That's amazing. I'm so happy. I'm so happy it's in your dream. Well, the thing is, you have to capture it. And I always think it's a double-edged sword when you wake up next to another person. Because on one hand, it's great that you can say it, because once the words have left your mouth, it's kind of transferred into long-term memory and out of hazy dream world. So on one hand, it's good that you get to tell someone straight away. But on the other hand, I think that you need a couple of minutes alone to meditate. And sometimes when you start to meditate in those early seconds, more details will come.
True, true, I suppose. I mean, since our first conversation beforehand, the topic of dreams has been on my mind, and I've been through phases where I've dreamed heavily, I've dreamed a lot. I've been through long phases where I've not dreamed at all. And now just having that thought in my mind to try and remember them, to hopefully even try and think of some to bring up now
Mm-hmm.
during our conversation, it's sort of invoked a much deeper and longer recognition of my own dreams. What would you say to somebody who doesn't dream so much? And if they'd like to, how would they go about that more so?
I feel like dreams are kind of like, you know, when there's like a stray cat in the street and you want to be friends with the stray cat, and you have to go slowly. You
I'm a
can't
dog
jump on him.
person.
Okay, I guess you don't have stray dogs so much. Okay, maybe a dog sometimes had a bit of a difficult life, you know, and they're a little bit snappy. They don't like humans so much. They're a little bit mistrustful because humans haven't been so kind to it. Um, and you can't go straight in and cuddle it because it will bite you or it will be terrified. So you go a little bit at a time. And when it licks your hand, you are incredibly grateful and you demonstrate how grateful you are. So next time, maybe it comes a little bit closer and it eats something out of your hand. For me, dreams are the same. Little, little, little. You have to coax them into your life. So the smallest thing you said you remembered your girlfriend in the dream. You and your girlfriend were in the dream. That's enough. You had a dream. Maybe next time you'll see your girlfriend and you'll remember what shoes she was wearing. Um, but it's really about, I feel like, expressing gratitude for what you have received and really processing that. And next time you'll get a little bit more and a little bit more.
That's perfect. Thank you. Sorry, we'll pause it here just for a
Okay.
second. Would it be possible just to center yourself in the frame just a
Okay.
little bit more?
Is the microphone okay without me
Yes,
being very close to it?
microphone's
Okay.
perfect. Yeah, it was just you were
Okay. I
kind
was
of
leaning towards
like
I was leaning towards the
over to
microphone.
the side a little bit.
Okay.
No, that's fine, and it sounds good anyway. I'll pause it. I'll cut it out, and we'll
Okay. I'm
jump
just
back
gonna get
into
some
it.
water.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Awesome. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Awesome. No, I mean, it does make sense that gratitude comes in. I mean, for myself, I've used gratitude in different ways, not for dreams in particular, but it does make a lot of sense where I have a saying for myself, and I'm a personal trainer by trade. And the saying I use for a lot of my clients is what you appreciate appreciates. As in, what you appreciate, what you look at, what you're grateful for, it begins to grow stronger and stronger, more and more, because you're paying attention to it. And it's almost like you're watering that plant. And it's interesting to see that dreams work in a similar way. But what
It's
about?
really amazing to me that you say this, because Ullman, like I'm his biggest fan,
Mhm.
Montague Ullman, his like one of his most important books where he described the dream methodology of group dream sharing was called Appreciating Dreams.
Okay, that's cool.
It's
Yeah, so
strange to me that you mentioned how much appreciation is important, because indeed he also thought the same.
I mean, I find that for myself in all different walks of life, and for myself in taking care of my body in terms of physical exercise, whether it be muscle work, cardio work, or sports, whatever it might be. It's that appreciation as opposed to frustration, gone as a love and enjoyment for the act, as opposed to say beating myself up because it's not great. I'm not doing so well, or it's not going the way I want it to. I'm more so like, let's try and flip it to I'm grateful for this opportunity to do so and that I can do this in the first place. And therefore, there is less of a barrier towards that gaining what I might want in the future from that task. And to see that dreams work in the same way, that's really interesting in terms of it's not myself it's not that, it's just what I see it as in that appreciation, but it translates even further than I imagined. But what about people who say have nightmares in the same regard where they are cursing those nightmares and they don't want them? And if the way to kind of bring on dreams is to appreciate them and acknowledge them in a very meditative way, what about nightmares where you don't want them, you curse them, you're trying to stop, but you can't stop them? Because I, like a bunch of others as well, have often had recurring nightmares or recurring things that might have been on the mind, and the dreams themselves don't seem related to what's going on in your life, but you know that somewhere the root cause might be.
I think nightmares are such a tricky space. So a study came out, I think it was just actually this month, that someone's had a very, very traumatic experience. These statistics are from the military, so really awful things that happened to them. Um, and frequently you have PTSD dreams as part of post-traumatic stress disorder. You have these recurring dreams. And the study found that the incidence of these awful, awful flashbacks were linked to suicide. So in the most extreme case, nightmares really have to be taken seriously. So if it's getting to that point where it's really impacting your mental health, then of course the answer is not dream work. The answer is a therapist and a qualified practitioner. But I do think that there's another group of nightmares which do have a place in dream work, and of course don't reach that extreme and are not part of a wider medical problem. Um, and I have learned to love my nightmares. I also have those. I also have nightmares. And it's a little harder. It's a little harder because they're not so beautiful. They're not so fun. They're not something you want to tell your girlfriend when you wake up. Um, but for me, my nightmares are really my subconscious screaming at me. So I feel like maybe the dreams are the whispers, and when I've been ignoring my subconscious too long, she's gonna start screaming. Um, so I'm not always grateful for my nightmares in the moment. Um, but looking back over the last maybe couple of years, I find gratitude. I find the gratitude there. Um, yeah, it's a scream. It's a scream from your subconscious that you've got to look at something.
Yeah, no, I read from reading through some of your articles previously. It wasn't. It stood out to me that you mentioned that some people are more hypersensitive to listening to those whispers, as you call them, of the
Yeah,
dreams. Which is not to say that on the surface level the dream is what it is. Let's say it's not a premonition. It's not something you have to look out for or worry about. But more so that the fact that you are having this kind of emotional reaction in your subconscious is more of a sign that you need to or should perhaps look into a bit more self-analysis and sort of maybe meditation or something where you can kind of self-analyze what you're looking at and just be a little bit more aware that there might be something brewing under the surface which eventually could turn into a scream, as you call it.
I think fundamentally, I believe that my dreams always want what's best for me. So if they're screaming at me, I might not enjoy it very much, but I know that they mean well. And that's helped me to process and accept, if not be grateful for, some of my nightmares.
I love that, taking that appreciation and that gratitude to a whole new level. Just to switch it a little bit from nightmares, I do have some sort of, well, whilst we're on nightmares, should I say instead?
Mhm.
Yes, you don't necessarily analyze dreams so much. It's more so, like you say, that group environment and just understanding and exploring them a little bit more. But say, like the common nightmares that people often have, which those jolting awake nightmares, are you able to kind of share what those might mean? Or is it a case of really from individual to individual, it's different? And by example of which, I mean, say, a lot of people might have a nightmare of being chased or of
Yes,
falling.
yes. So some of these nightmares are really universal in all cultures. So being naked in public, we've all got that. Falling, being in a car that won't stop. Um, Yeah, the typical things. In There is one theory, perhaps most relevant for these kinds of very physical, instinctual feelings, that our brains rehearse. So we rehearse very basic survival threats so that when they come in real life, we're ready. We know what to do. Um, is one of many theories, but for those nightmares especially, it seems particularly true. Mostly given that they occur in every culture, so it makes me think there's probably some kind of evolutionary basis to them.
Ooh, okay, so I love how that rehearsal, that idea of rehearsal, because I've played lots of sports in the past. One of me is football. For us, football, soccer, and that rehearsal element comes in to my dreams quite a lot, where I don't really realize that I'm dreaming, but out of nowhere in the middle of the night, I'll just kind of snap and kick my leg. Like as if I'll strike a ball and I'll kick. And I've seen loads of memes beforehand of people going through dreams and they're about to kick a ball on the volley, and then they just kind of wake up and they accidentally kick their girlfriend beside them because they're rehearsing something in their head. So is it? This is quite interesting. Sorry, you're sparking more of an interest in dreams that I never thought was there. With the idea of that rehearsal, because if you're very rarely in a situation in today's world where you are, say, running away from a predator, or you have to be really heightened for a fight or flight situation. to think that it's possibly a rehearsal of something that could happen because it's happened that previously in the past that it's almost instinctive. That's really cool.
We also could take it backwards. So, like I said, there are many theories about our people, and there's also the opposite theory, which is that you are processing behavior that's already happened in real life. So perhaps something very scary happened to you the day before, and your brain is trying to work through that emotion. So perhaps you weren't running from a man waving a knife in the street, um, but perhaps you saw a scary movie or somebody jumped out at you too quickly, and you had that fight or flight response, and your brain is still trying to work through that residual heightened emotion that's actually not necessary anymore.
Okay. So that could possibly help to explain. So I'm kind of piecing together different parts from your articles and how they all intertwine into this dream world that we're creating. And that element of culture, like you say, you're passionate about, that could help to explain that idea of communities having sort of collective dreams or ideas and
Hmm.
having similar dreams because of maybe something that's happening in an area or in within like a small group of people, which is more notable to them than it is to say people of a different community. How does that sort of collective dream work?
Okay, so the basic, I suppose, the most fundamental, basic way of explaining it is that as a group of people, perhaps, let's take Amsterdam. I live in Amsterdam, and I also collect dreams in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, we are a group of people. We don't know each other necessarily, but we're experiencing the same world. We go down the same streets. We have the same political climate. We probably have similar fears because we live in the same place. We probably have similar desires because we've all come to Amsterdam for same kinds of jobs, same kind of lifestyle. So we're connected as community members, maybe not personally, but we're connected. We experience the world in the same way. Um, so the kind of fears I have are probably similar to the kind of fears my neighbor the next street over has, even if we've never discussed them explicitly, even if we haven't admitted them to ourselves. We probably have the same kind of fears. So in the dreams, those same kinds of themes are likely to come through. And whilst my dreams, you might not be able to see those fears because there's so much noise and chaos and beautiful everything in my dreams. If you get enough of us, the signal gets strong enough to be seen through the noise. So as a collective, we can find patterns we couldn't find as individuals.
Wow, you're so receptive to this stuff, and I absolutely love it because there's so many different connections which are just sparking off in my brain, which rarely happens from just one conversation. I used to get it quite a lot when I was younger, reading about things I found interesting. I was like, oh my god, no way, that's how that works. But it's rare that you get to speak to somebody who can kind of blow your mind wide open and think of, oh my god, that's a revelation, that's a revelation, that's a revelation. Because I'm just thinking now about the sort of consequences of what you've just said exactly when it comes to the wider culture and the whole history of humanity with, say, religion as a perfect example of a collection of people with the same fears and same issues and same things that affect their lives being so prominent that when they got together and had conversations and in community halls or in churches, these things were raised and then that made it into scripture to the point where that's where we base rules off of, and that's how we base our society and culture from those collective fears. Is there any kind of
Some
do you see any prominence in that?
Some evolutionary psychologists actually think that religion came from dreams, because I suppose I think we started dream sharing, I think around 40,000 BC. So we started at the very beginning of human civilization. And some evolutionary psychologists actually think dreams were the first indication to humans that we are actually indeed connected and there is something else outside of our material world. And that is where religion came from.
Oh, cool. So, wait, sorry, you just mentioned from 40,000 BC. What is the exact historic evidence of that? I'm just
Well,
curious.
it's all with all evolutionary psychology, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. Nobody really knows for sure. But there is a
But it
theory,
makes
and
sense.
it's one of my favorite dream theories. I have so many favorites that when humans were moving from individual hunters towards a more collective community-based system of society, which we call it human self-domestic. We became domesticated,
Something like
domestication,
that.
something like this. We became
Yeah.
domestic. We moved from individuals who competed to a collective that worked together. And that started around 40,000 BC. And around that time, we also saw the emergence of cave paintings and storytelling. Um, it's when we became humans, I think. We weren't animals, we were now humans. And they've done some, I'm not sure how they find it out actually, but they believe that that's where dream sharing started.
Well, it helps a lot. That what makes us human in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes is the fact that we are a community. It's almost ethereal how it works. I'm not so much for, to quote, say woo woo, but I do look at how a lot of spirituality connects with how our brain works and how we have evolved, so that the spiritual side of things and what people are trying to say and put into words is true, but not exactly how they say it is true, if that makes sense. So when you're talking about that, say, domestication of, say, us from animals to humans, where we've got that our brains are evolving and we're doing different things. And one of those key things that we did was we sat around the campfire and we told stories. We told stories, we listened to other people's stories, and our stories are very related to our dreams because we are creative. We create stories. We want to emphasize things. And often, in order to get a point across in a story, we have to sort of, I can't remember the think of the word off the top of my head now, but we have to sort of embrace that theory or that idea and scale it up to a factor of 100 to kind of get that really emotional, visceral response from people. So, and that's exactly what our dreams do. Our dreams are amplified versions of our real lives, effectively, and how we respond and how we think and how we feel, more importantly. Which I love, and I'd love to see that. I'd love to know that that's a theory that's already there. But you mentioned a few times that there's so many different dream theories. What are, say, some of your favorite? Actually, you're smiling as I'm about to ask the question. What are some of your favorite dream theories? And then also, which are some that possibly contradict each other, so we can see things from both sides?
Okay, so I'll give you two extremes. I'll give you my favorite one first, and then I'll come back to my least favorite one. So my favorite one is indeed that we have a collective unconscious, and that when we dream, we tap into that collective unconscious.
I'm
Um,
here. Sorry.
so all of all of the fears, all of our desires, everything that we believe as a group, as a society, as all of humankind, exist in this shared unconscious. And our dreams are really us tapping into it. And that for me, that's fundamental to collective dreaming, because if our dreams came from the collective, they only make sense when we return them in waking world to the group. So this is why I collect dreams. This is why I look for patterns. For me, this is why dreams are so fundamental to being human, because it's where we connect together every single night. We see all the way through science, all the way through history, during times of turmoil, especially cultural or societal turmoil, when we were disconnected or scared or confused, that's when our dreams start to sync up more and more. The science, I mean, if you would ask, yeah, the science, I don't know how this happens. It's very theoretical, perhaps a little bit too woo-woo and not so scientific, but this is my favorite dream. For me, this is what feels true. So that's my favorite dream.
So who was it
That's
who
my
came? Who was it who kind of came up with that theory, or is that a very
Well, I suppose the
common
collective
theory within dream
unconscious
work?
was Jung. So it was Carl Jung. He
Yeah.
came up with the collective unconscious. Then for me, Montague Ullman really made it practical. He was the one who said, bring it back to the collective. So yeah, so I suppose, and there's still today people doing amazing work with social dreaming. There were people who collected group dreams around the Ukraine crisis, around 9/11. In COVID, people did amazing work around the thinking up of our dreams.
So
So
what were
this
some
work
of
is going
the
on today.
so what were some of the common aligned dreams during some of the world's most notable periods?
So probably going all the way back to the 1930s, there was an amazing woman. I can't pronounce her name, so I won't. Charlotte Burda. I'm probably absolutely destroying her name, but an amazing woman in Berlin at the time. She was Jewish and she was a journalist, and she collected dreams. She actually wasn't a dream worker, but she noticed during the rise of the Nazis in Berlin in the 1920s and then the 30s, people were having weird dreams. So a lot of the dreams that they were having actually foreshadowed some of the most terrible things that happened during the Nazis' power. And at the time, they they couldn't have known. The dreams were things like being stuck in the post office and having this overwhelming bureaucracy, and you just couldn't navigate the bureaucracy, and it was like a maze. And then we now know what happened in Nazi Germany. So much of the control was done through bureaucracy. Or if we look back towards COVID, people were having all sorts of dreams about faceless people. And then we now know, of course, we wore the masks all the way through COVID. So there's often clues coming through in the dreams before the terrible things happen. There was another famous case in the 1960s in England, actually in Wales, the Aberfan disaster. So there was a terrible mining disaster that there was a Welsh village and there was too much rain and all of the dirt from a mine, it came down and it crushed the children's school, and hundreds, I think, more than 100 children died, and it was just a terrible, terrible tragedy. Um, but lots of people said, "Hey, I had these nightmares before it happened." Even some of the people in the village said they'd been having these nightmares. So often before disasters, whether they are political or societal or natural, we can see things coming through.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it does make sense. I mean, it's as you say, a lot of dream work. There's the science behind it isn't there, and well, it's obviously we can't just read dreams other than what people tell us and what they say. But to see that the connection between people is still there, and it kind of reminds me of something a friend of mine told me beforehand, where it's almost like these avenues in our brain are already well trodden through years and years and years and years of evolution, where it's a case of the way he puts it is that history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So it's those dreams could be a very much a sense of, okay, so this is so many, so these things are happening all around us, and as we already know that Jungian theory being there's so much more underneath that tip of the iceberg of what is consciousness and subconsciousness. So that we are picking up on all of these things all around us that are happening at one moment and to the next moment without even realizing. And then for a collection of people all picking up on these exact same things where that fear just kind of bubbles up and emanates very often. Again, but for it to be so specific is just absolutely bizarre. Just the capabilities of our subconscious mind is ridiculous. That the faceless people that's crazy. The faceless people, and then obviously the school as well. That's because I read that on one of your articles of the school, and when I was reading it, I was like, well, surely not. 'Cause it almost seems I'm in disbelief whilst reading it. It almost seems like it can't be true.
I'm always a little careful with dream work, in that for me, one of the reasons I love dream work is because it's really where spirituality collides with science. So I always will look for the scientific explanation, not because I don't believe in the spiritual side or I don't respect other people's beliefs in the spiritual side, but I will always look to see, okay, what does science tell us? Can we know something, either today, or can science somehow evolve its methodology to somehow give that basis? I suppose I'm a scientist at heart. Maybe, yeah, I'm a scientist at heart. Um, so for me, it does. I do think that there's a non-spiritual, a non-religious explanation, and that could be that we pick up on tiny, tiny cues that we don't necessarily realize. So perhaps looking back at the village that was crushed, a very perceptive child might have looked out the window and noticed, hey, there's kind of a really big pile of crap on the top of that hill. That's kind of scary to me. And then might then have a nightmare. It wasn't magic. It didn't reach conscious perception. And then if we look more broadly, because people all over the UK said they had these dreams, let's assume that they're telling the truth, because I always think with dream work, you start with the assumption that someone's telling the truth. Perhaps if there wasn't very good health and safety on that mine, perhaps the other mines had the same problems. Perhaps everybody was looking at mountains and seeing big piles of crap and thinking like, oh,
It could
something's not
happen.
right. So I think
Yeah.
that there are clues that we see so many pieces of information every single day, and our brain filters out most of it because you couldn't go around your life noticing every tiny little thing. Um, and for me, dreams are where these clues start to come through.
Have you ever heard of something called the Pygmalion effect?
Yes, but maybe you explain
How?
it.
Okay, I'll explain it for the listeners anyway. So the Pygmalion effect, the way that I understand it, it's a psychological theory that the way that we act and perceive ourselves is the way that we portray ourselves to others, and then others perceive what we have put across in a certain way, in which then therefore they respond in a certain way, and then that comes back to us to self-reinforce our initial beliefs. And that can start from somebody else, and it can start from yourself if you've got that awareness within yourself, and that can very often compound and snowball over and over until that belief you had, which may have just been a little inkling previously, is now something that you yourself and the wider spread community is starting to see those seeds of. Could that in any way relate to that, the way that dreams spread across a society, and how that in effect affects an entire culture's lifestyle?
So I think that there are two pieces. The first is indeed dreams are contagious. That's one of the things I love about dream sharing is I go home and I have my own version of other people's dreams, and it makes me feel incredibly close to them. Really very intimate, and I really enjoy that. Um, the other piece is perhaps more of a belief than a scientific theory. For me, dreams are a mirror, but a very true mirror. So all of those stories you've told yourself in the daytime, I'm logical, I am sensible, I believe this, I'm not scared of this. The mirror is a very overly honest mirror. The dream is an overly honest mirror um, that you can't hide from, um, but is going to be there every single night. And for me, that's why it's so beautiful that it cuts through those stories and it just shows you the fundamental truth of who you are. And perhaps more broadly, who we are as a society now.
True, I've not thought of it that way. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially with that mirror, because I'm myself on my own sort of journey through understanding myself, which everybody is on in their own right, within to some degree. I had to go through a large phase of actually paying attention to myself and who I was and what I wanted, what I didn't want, what I liked, what I didn't like, and then also open up to some harsh truths. And when I was, say, at my worst a couple of years ago, where I did not have the slightest clue, as so many people do in their early 20s when they're coming into the adult world and coming into themselves. I genuinely thought at the time that I could just kind of ignore a lot of things. Like I could ignore that whispering, as you put it, not just in dreams, but in like the subconscious. And I'd say that in a very kind of pre-masculine embodiment, be like, it's nothing. I can deal with this. It's fine. I've just got to keep on doing what I'm doing and doing and whatever. And I can just ignore these little things because mind over matter and yada yada yada. But then those whispers creep up on you. And at the time, I had no idea. I just thought this was just like, okay, whatever. But they creep up on you very, very slowly. But then it starts to get a lot quicker. And that was at that time I had so many dreams, which were just, I woke up in the middle of the night in sweats, just like, whoa, what the hell? It felt so real. And this is from, at the time, I wasn't very creative. I didn't see myself as very creative. I didn't see myself as much of I didn't have many dreams. And if I did have a dream, it was very much like as if someone was telling me a story and I wasn't really paying too much attention. Because I just thought it didn't matter. It was very much that male ego thing of these things in here don't matter. But then got to a point where eventually they got really loud. And I was like, oh shit, maybe there's something to that. And then the way I kind of look at it is we are always building up our perception of the world brick by brick. And we build up brick by brick, and almost with guys especially, I believe that a lot of men fortify themselves brick by brick, encapsulate themselves inside their own walled castle, where they are protected, they are safe, they've put all these bricks in place, they know how this works, we've compartmentalized that, we've compartmentalized this fits here, this fits there, perfect, we can get on with what we want to do and achieve, and we are nice and safe inside our brick wall, inside our castle. But then you start to see a tiny little crack, like a tiny, tiny little crack where you're seeing a little bit of light shine through. And you see that light shine through, and you can do one of two things, and you'll see this. I saw this straight away within so many people after this happened to me, where men in particular, in my opinion, will just go and take the cement and paste straight over it. We'll paste straight over that little crack so we can't see anything that's outside of this wall. It doesn't make sense with what we've got here. I'm going to paste over it. And that's where you often see that arrogance and that shutting down of ideas and that you're wrong, I'm right, listen to me, or just complete ignorance of any other perspective other than your own, because that just wouldn't work. And you see that a lot with certain people, certain men in particular. But if you go the other way and start to inspect this little light and to see what's there, then it starts to get a little bit scary and think, oh, maybe things aren't as I assumed they were. Maybe they are now so much different than I thought they were. And then as soon as you start to peer into that little light, the whole thing starts to crumble and fall around you. And that's when it can very easily go into a panic. And you've got to kind of rebuild afterwards and try and frantically put things back together. And that's when those dreams are screaming at you, as you say. That's when life seems to be a little bit too much, and it can be absolutely, completely overwhelming for a lot of people. But for me, one thing I found post going through that and then realizing that, hang on, I survived, I'm okay, everything's okay, it allowed me to put those bricks back together and start building that wall up again with space, with a window, shall I say. With a window so I can see these things, I can accept these things, I can accept things that I don't know, and really look at things with much more of an open mind. And that was when my dreams in particular, I never really put much thought to it, but my dreams in particular just kind of exploded from there. I was blown away by the depth, the quality, the colour. For the first time in my entire life, I actually was able to taste things in my dreams, which was just bizarre. I remember one morning waking up, I was like, what the hell? This dream, I thought I was in this dream because I was eating some food and I could smell the food and I could taste the food. This has never happened before at all. And it kind of, to me, and I don't know what truth you may have seen from the literature or science or the dream work that you've done, but that was kind of opening my mind up to the wider world and to other people's opinions and perspectives, and really breaking down being forced to kind of chuck away my ego and put it to the side for a moment. It kind of took away a very mental block, which allowed me to be so much more creative. So as a long way around of saying that was my experience, and I've always been curious of whether or not that has been the case for other people, and especially within dream work as well, whether or not whether or not people have had a sort of key moments where their dreams have just kind of gone.
First, I think that it's amazing to note that you had that experience in your early 20s. For me, that's incredibly young to have that experience, and also what a gift that you've got to have that so early. I hear often people
It
saying
took
that
me a long
33 is
time
the
to
age.
see that as a gift. It took me, sorry,
I can imagine in your early 20s. Yeah,
it,
I can imagine
I
you're surrounded by people who haven't been through that.
well, I didn't. So did you say? Sorry, we've been on the call. It makes it a little bit harder to say if we're speaking over each other at some points. Did you say that it's quite? So you say it's quite early for some people to have that experience. In your experience,
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I feel like what an amazing thing that you got to have that so early on in your life. But for me, it's surprising a little that it's so early.
okay. So when would you say that people generally have that? Well, in your experience, have that kind of experience, and what kind of forms does that take?
For me, I don't have sight. This is my own experience. Now, maybe I switch and I say I'm speaking about my own experience, because indeed, I had this experience when I was 32, and speaking with other people who are involved in dream work, or just people who I've met who are on this same path. Because indeed, once you start this path, you meet other people in the same place. That's sort of how it
It's
works.
weird
It
how
becomes your
serendipitous it all is.
ecosystem. Hmm. They generally, I always notice they tend to be in their 30s. I mean, I wish I could have had mine in my 20s. That sounds amazing, but also scarier, I think.
Well, I'd never. I mean, to me, it was again very much a guy thing. It's not something I've spoken about to many people. It's not something I'd go out and because not unless people have had that experience and it kind of comes up after a long time of knowing someone. It's not something you generally talk about, and then when it does, it's again often a solo journey throughout that. And it was a case of I have met some people, and whenever I've spoken to them who've had similar experiences, it's almost like that. I from the first moment of speaking to them, I'm like, I feel connected with yourself. I feel like when we talk to each other, it feels more open, it feels more kind, it feels there's no barriers in the way. We can actually connect and express ourselves how we want to express ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely recognize that. So until about 2 years ago, I didn't really dream. I know that sounds like crazy, and I think that's probably why now I'm so obsessed with dreams, because I didn't have them for such a long time. Um, oh, I never told you my least favorite dream theory, but this is a good time to tell you my least favorite dream theory.
Oh, here we go.
Um, but I suppose it's all connected. Um, so there's a very, very basic, a very mechanical theory of dreams that is all just your brain in the nighttime. The lower parts of your brain, the parts that do emotion, or the more basic parts, the more evolutionary early parts, I should say, um, just start firing randomly when you're asleep, just to clean up, just the noise they don't need anymore, just a nighttime cleaning, a deep clean, get you ready for the next day, get rid of all the crap we don't need. Um, Completely random. And the newer parts of your brain, so the forebrain, that's more logical, more advanced, sees all of this weird noise happening, and your brain doesn't like noise. Your brain likes patterns. Um, so it looks at that noise and it just does the best it can to put some kind of story on top of it, um, kind of make sense of all the crap. So what you come out with is just this nonsensical story. It's nothing. Forget it. It's just noise. It's just clean. Um, I don't even think the most hardcore neuroscientists would buy into that theory. I think it's probably evolved a little bit more now. But for a long time, that was the main story. It's just noise. Just ignore it. Get on with your real life. Get on with your real world. You got a job to do. You got you got things to do. Hurry up.
That
Um,
was my perspective of things for so long.
That was also my perspective. So when I was actually working in neuroscience, I wasn't interested in dreams because I just thought like, oh, come on, we've got better things to do. Yeah, forget about that noise. So for a long time, that was indeed my worldview.
Well, it does feel like there's a very throughout people's own progression from their teenage years to their 20s, 30s, and onwards. And I'm excited for that journey for myself, as I'm sure you are as well, for yourself. That people have certain ideas which they kind of cement in, and then they realize when they realize they're wrong, it's like, oh, okay, maybe not, because I mean that old-fashioned theory, like you said, that just that noise, as you say, the sound. I feel like I've heard Matt Walker. Do you know Matt Walker?
His name is familiar.
Sorry.
His name is
Uh,
familiar, but I don't watch a
yes,
lot
so
of
Matt
I don't watch
Walker's
a lot of
the
content.
guy who wrote Why We Sleep.
Ah, of
He
course.
wrote
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Why We Sleep. Yes,
yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure, I think I remember this correctly. I may not be, but he wrote something or said something along those lines, to my knowledge, that it's the best of our knowledge that it's just noise, that we're kind of clearing out all the corners of our house, and it's a bit like spring cleaning in that sense. It kind of feels a little bit not disheartening, but when you feel these things so viscerally and how the effect that has on your life afterwards, when you wake up after you've had a really positive dream, you've got energy, you've got a spark, you go around, you're more positive to people in this from time to time. But if you've had often a really terrifying dream or a scary dream, that you might wake up instead and just be very blunt and closed off from the world because you've kind of got that extra adrenaline and cortisone rushing through the system. And that, to me, a dream itself in terms of its, whether a
Okay.
dream itself within its context is sensical or worth taking note of or not, they do. They must have, well, they do have a very physical effect on our day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. For me, since I started listening to my dreams, my entire life has changed. Um, it's such a huge gift. And it doesn't mean that that activation synthesis hypothesis that I just spoke about isn't true. It probably is true. There's lots of evidence for it. Probably it does clean up the neurons in your brain. But that doesn't mean it's not also an incredibly deep experience that connects you with yourself and with other people. It can be two things.
So how, and well, so take us through your story a little bit. So how you became so involved with dreams and how that kind of took over,
Hmm.
and where did you start and where are we now and where are we looking at in the future within the world of dreams? And tell me a little bit about yourself and how you actually became you.
Okay. That's a question. So I always was fascinated with psychology and with neuroscience. And something that I always wondered was there are certain people who can see patterns. So sometimes they're artists, sometimes they are amazing businessmen who can look at a market and just know that's the route, that's what's going to get me money. Sometimes they are incredibly emotionally intelligent and they can see someone crying and they can know exactly like what to do. They can see the pattern, they can see the signal in the noise. Um, so in some ways, this is what we call IQ. People with high IQ are really good at pattern recognition. I don't know if you've ever taken an IQ test. They show you like physical symbols, and they're like, which block goes next.
It's not like any
So I was
standardized
always
test that you've ever had at school
yeah,
at all.
yeah, and I was always really curious about why are some people so good at pattern recognition and some people aren't. Um, so that was actually what my PhD was in. I looked at people's brains and I tried to understand why some people are very good at this pattern recognition and why some people are not very good at pattern recognition. Um, but it was very physical. So I did not talk about the mind. I talked about what is the brain doing under a scanner? Where is the blood moving in this brain? Um, and then I compared that with very basic testing. So I always had an interest, but that felt quite unsatisfying to me because, okay, this person is good at pattern recognition. Like, so what? Like, this doesn't tell me anything about them as a person. Um, so I moved away from academia and I went into corporate research. So I do research in organizations and I try to understand people's experience of the workplace, which I loved. I loved. I think you see the best of human behavior in organizations and also the worst. I also did a lot of work around employee well-being all the way through COVID and also the Ukraine crisis. So I also came to understand the crisis that exists, the mental health crisis. I was I was working with people in society who have access to mental health care. And I always was incredibly aware that if these people who can afford the best doctors are experiencing their life in this way, like what the hell is going on with everybody else? How is everybody getting through life so disconnected, so lost, um, so incredibly overworked? Um, there's something going wrong in the culture. There's something that we're not talking about. There's something missing here. So that was my professional career, and I still work in corporate research, and I still love it. But in my personal life, I would describe myself as being quite externally focused. So I didn't necessarily have a particularly rich inner life. Um, I would say I had a full life. Yeah, I had a good education, I had good jobs, I had a nice apartment. Um, but I always felt like something was missing. There was something, the colors weren't bright enough. Um, Occasionally there would be clues. So I would have panic attacks or I would get incredibly angry or things would happen and I would think like, "Oh, that's a little odd. That's happening to me." with my life so great? Why is this happening? Um, but I just ignored it because also I saw everyone around me having the same experience. Who doesn't have anxiety and depression? Everyone had it. So okay. Um, and I thought like maybe I'll fall in love with the right person, or some women say when they have children, like maybe something will click, maybe I'll get the right job, maybe I'll get the better apartment. This weird feeling of everything being in not black and white, but not quite in color. This will shift. Something will happen. Um, I just wasn't quite connected. I think I was very good at telling myself and telling everyone around me that everything is fine. That, okay, maybe very difficult things happened to me when I was younger, but now I'm fine. Like, now I survived. Now I'm okay. Like, just keep smiling. It's going to be okay. And of course, like, other people have it worse. So why should I be complaining? Like, I have a house, I have a job, I'm okay. We're all okay. Um, but I was living the wrong life. That's how I describe it. I was living the wrong life. This wasn't my life. And then I would say maybe about 3 years ago, strange things started to happen. So I started to really dislike a lot of people in my life. Like I started to think like, why are these people my friends? Like how did this happen to me? Or I had strange physical illnesses. Like my face got paralyzed, all on one side of my face got paralyzed, and the doctors weren't really sure why it happened. Um, Strange things. And then maybe almost exactly 2 years ago, I had like a random violent attack. It just happens, there was just a criminal and there was a violent attack. Um, and then something snapped. And I so much wanted to keep smiling and to say everything was fine. I wanted to repackage it. Like I repackage everything into like I can just, how can I thread this through my story? How can I make this like just a little story and what happened to Emily? I so much wanted it to have not been what it was. But two things were different this time that hadn't been different in the past. The first was I was around a different kind of person. So I just happened to be around people who were more awake. Um, and they were looking at me like, this isn't fine. Like a terrible thing has happened to you. Like, this isn't fine. You can't ignore this. Um, and the second thing, I suppose, was this uh, my body was like physically damaged. Like I couldn't ignore the fact. Like I was in pain. I was in physical pain because a bad thing had happened. And everything I had been avoiding, like the charade fell away. The act wasn't working anymore. It didn't work. Like everyone around me could see, like it didn't work. I couldn't keep the play going. I couldn't keep dancing. I couldn't distract them. Like it was over. It was over. It was over. And then I had a very, very difficult few months. I had uh, almost like an entire shattering, really a disconnection between my mind and my body. So it was almost as if I wasn't inside my own body. Um, it was exactly like that, actually. It wasn't. It was
Like a disassociation.
like a disassociation. Like my perspective was, I was walking through Manchester Airport, and I realized I was looking down on my own body. So I wasn't behind my eyes. I was above my head. I was physically disconnected. Um, and it wasn't, you would think it would be scary or like sad, but it was actually just incredibly annoying. It was really annoying to me because I had just got a big promotion at my job that I was very excited about. Like I had things to do. Like I was like, I gotta get on with my life, and I just like I can't get back into my body. It was annoying.
Sorry, I don't mean to
And
laugh. It's just how you phrase that.
yeah, it was really irritating.
This really important thing that is going on, and there's an experience which now you'd look at and with so much appreciation and adornment for. At the time, that mindset was, this is fucking frustrating. You've got things you want to do. And it's just
Yeah, and it was
that kind of
because my
treadmill that we're on.
absolutely, absolutely. indeed, this incredibly like important experience was happening to me, and I was worried. Yeah, to be honest, I was also really worried, like, I would put on weight, like, I wouldn't, like, look nice, like, somebody would see me in the street and think I'm a bit weird, like, all this stuff doesn't matter. Um, so anyway, I was going through this very, very strange time of complete disconnection, and I tried to explain it to people. I tried to explain it to, like, a medical doctor, like a GP, but it's not like I think he didn't understand because it's not an illness. I think people thought I was speaking metaphorically, but I wasn't. That was what was happening to me. I wasn't connected to myself. Um, I couldn't really taste anything. I couldn't really feel anything. I was just. It was like being a ghost. It was the strangest thing. It was the strangest thing. And around that time, I was like, okay, you got to take this seriously. Like we can't pretend anymore. Something isn't right. Um, and I wasn't experiencing any emotion in my real life. But around that time, I started to have the most intense dreams. Like dreams like I'd never had, dreams like I'd never experienced in the real world, like new emotions, like new everything was new in the dream. Um, and to be honest, if I would have had another choice, I would have ignored them. But I didn't have another choice. That was all I had. That was the only experience of life I was having was in my dreams. Um, so I don't feel like I found dreams. I feel like dreams found me.
I love that little tailing up, rounding it at the end. That's wow. That's seeing what you've just said there and relating that to my own experience and the feelings that I have, the way that you portrayed it and how it felt for you. I can see the massive connections in how we both experienced the things that were happening to us in those certain ways. And that, again, that disconnection, that sort of dissonance between what's going on in your life and feeling sort of, again, not fully present and within what you're doing. That was something which, for me, in that same regard as what you've just said, it became quite hard to ignore after a while. It became so hard to ignore. And again, the dreams were so vivid, so vibrant. And then it, to me, it almost then felt like every now and then it was a switch, which I couldn't control at the beginning. It was a switch between, okay, now I'm just kind of droning through life and I'm just kind of almost as in like in the matrix of just going through day to day, going to work, going to see friends, and you're not really present and not connected. And then at other moments it was, I'm really in this. I feel this. I'm feeling what I'm supposed to feel, and I'm connecting with people in that same regard. And then having that to then over time being almost able to sort of turn that switch on in certain situations where I kind of needed to and things were more important, where I could just be like, okay, we're in this. And for me, one thing I found straight away after that similar thing happened to myself was whenever I came to speak with people, and I'd speak to people more and more often, they would connect with me on such a deeper level. The strangest thing, almost as soon as it happened, it wasn't kind of gradually, people just started opening up to me more and more. They were talking to me more and more, and I kind of came to realize it was because now, whereas beforehand I was always in my own head, now I'm actually here listening to somebody. I'm actually here listening to you without any judgment, without any issues in the way, without thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner later. I'm just here and I'm present with you. And then people responded in a way which was so bizarre to me, where everything I previously had wanted, or everything I wanted to connect with people in that way and wanted to kind of be a person who have such great close interpersonal connections with lots of people. And I was trying so hard to do that. As soon as I almost stopped trying and I was just there, I'm going to listen to this person, I'm going to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
It came to me as in they just kind of poured out to me, and I poured out to them, and we just had these really deep connections and really deep conversations, which is one of the things that helped me to be so sort of grateful for that similar experience. And then it's just something you look at, and it's almost a pivotal moment in your life, and to see that moment when it happened for yourself, it almost serendipitously culminated in different passions and hobbies and areas of things that you're doing in your life all kind of coming together at once. With now your passion from your background with psychology, your work area in sort of working culture, and then the dreams at the same time. The way that you've been able to spin this and say not spin this, as a sort of poor term of phrase, but the way that you've kind of incorporated all these things, and now you're so open to what you're doing and what you're seeing and your own experiences, appreciating your own experiences, and now using them to your advantage and everybody else's advantage as well, is just so wonderful to see.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel incredibly lucky. I feel incredibly lucky. And I'm also incredibly conscious of the fact that I was able to explore this dream space, especially the science behind the dreams. Indeed, because I had this academic background that gave me access to the right people and to the right papers. One of the reasons why I like to write and I like to speak is in order to support people who didn't necessarily have access to those same academic articles or that same scientific education, in order that they can also access this incredibly important wisdom.
Of course, of course. So just to bring it back a little bit then, for yourself being in a position where you've got that academic background as well, and the papers and the people around you and the connections to be able to do so, where could that lead? Where do you want to take this sort of dream theory now in the future and in your present with the
So
scientific element as well?
for me, my passion will always be around collective dreaming. And I think this is something that I want to bring more and more into people's everyday lives. So I work on a project at the moment called The Week in Dreams, where I collect dreams. People send me their dreams. I put little, maybe I shouldn't say this. Okay, I can say this. I put stickers on lampposts. I'm not 100% sure if you're supposed to do that, but I put stickers on lampposts. Or I put them in toilets. Or I put them in I put my stickers around. And they just say give me your dreams. And people send me their dreams. And then I try to find patterns in the dreams every week. Um, and so for me, there is a really important space in collective dreaming. Whereas previously we've used it in times of stress, in times of crisis. We've come together to talk about how our nightmares are the same. For me, there is a huge untapped potential in collective dreaming to do it in a positive way. So there are terrible things happening in the world, and of course, these come through our dreams. But there also are amazing things happening in our world at the moment. And if we were open to that shared creativity, what could that look like? What would that look like if we all just pooled our collective humanness into our dreams? So I'm incredibly passionate around collective dreaming. I also would like to find a way to bring dreaming more into the mainstream. So I think that the field of dreaming has perhaps suffered slightly in that it's had the scientists over here doing one thing, and then I don't know what you call them, the hippies, I don't know what you call them, the
the
spiritual club,
dreamers.
the crystal people. I also love crystals over here.
Well, it's
And I think
so you mentioned with those people in particular though, is that it's such a shame that they get that kind thrown into that bucket and just spoken of in such a certain way, because it's almost like neglecting a part of ourselves, which
I
can be,
think that
when
both
if used
yeah,
properly, yeah,
I
but when
think
used
both
properly
sides
could.
suffer. I think oh sorry.
Sorry, that's a little bit of lag between us. No, you go, please.
I think both sides suffer. So I enjoy both worlds and I spend time in both worlds. But I think that you can't go fully scientific and ignore your intuition and your lived experience, especially the lived experiences of people who can't necessarily enter the scientific world for various reasons, mostly financial. And at the same time, being only with intuition and ignoring the science or just saying boring, I don't want to. This is not the way to go either. The truth is somewhere in between. It's in the collaboration.
Of course, I mean that middle path within. I mean, in terms of just bringing day to day people and bringing the masses into a field where everyone's experience matters and is important, especially for pattern recognition, where you're going to lose a lot of the general public by just speaking in scientific terms and within papers and lectures and whatnot. But you're also going to lose another massive portion of the public if you just purely speak about the metaphysical dream realm and what this means for the world. But I feel like a lot of people want to kind of understand something for themselves in a way that they're not going to be an outcast by standing up and speaking at the same time. So obviously it's very hard for people, well, people find it very hard to go to therapy in the same way that people find it very hard for just opening up to themselves, not to mention anybody else. So what would you say? So sorry, I'm saying, when it comes to that sort of dreams and opening up about dreams, I almost feel a lot of people, because they don't take it as seriously or have that impression that they can just throw it away, that they're often more open about speaking about dreams than they are about speaking about their true feelings.
Absolutely. I think because a dream doesn't have to be good or bad. You haven't got to say, "Oh, I feel really sad and I had this sad dream." It's just a dream is just what it is. It just is. It just is, and you can find meaning in it, or you can not. It can just be a dream, just something that you saw. I think that there is a huge, mm, I think there is a huge gender challenge as well, in that generally men are less likely to join dream groups. Even back in the 1960s with Ullman, I think like 1 in 10 were women. And the dream groups I also go to generally are more women. So men will share their dreams with me one on one, and they share their dreams also anonymously, I assume. Um, but I do think that there is really a blank space there, and I'm not 100% sure what to do about that. It's notable that the experts, these like the grandfathers of dreaming, Freud, Jung, Ullman, these were men. So men, they know stuff about dreams. But I do think that there is a blank space there, and I'm not sure exactly how to attack that.
True, very true. I mean, in the same within therapy in general, that therapy, in terms of how it is known to the masses historically, as in sitting in a room one to one and speaking with somebody, very often that speaking about your emotions is tailored towards females. And that's something that females often find a lot of benefit from, which men don't see so much benefit from. Just because in the differences in how our brains are wired in different ways, where a lot of men, from my experience, I have a lot of male PT clients, and they just say it's the kind of best type of therapy. Where for a lot of guys, that social element is a lot of the main thing, where they just want to be able to go and exert a load of energy and then speak to them friends about something that's not important, and then that really helps them. Where if you take the social element for girls for a lot of time, is if they'd like to go out with their friends, they'll have a little chat about what's going on, about society, about culture, about how they're feeling, and or the closer friends how they're feeling, and it's more on the sort of forefront of their minds. And then I feel like bridging that gap is something that's coming very, very quickly into sort of the mainstream of different ways to approach things, and not seeing that we're different and we should, and that's a bad thing, but seeing that we're different and looking at how we can use that to our advantage, especially when it comes, because at the end of the day, any kind of dream work or therapy work or psychology work or sociology work, in, it's all for the benefit of people. It's for the benefit of society, so that we can all feel better and be happier and live healthier, happier lives because of that. But then, with the differences between males and females, with the dreams that you have been sent, what, if any, if you were able to share any of them anonymously, what kind of patterns do you see?
Oh my goodness, I could talk about this for hours. Um, so there's what I won't talk about is the normal ones that you would expect. So my teeth are falling out, I'm naked in public, my ex-boyfriend's back, the standard. And I get
Yeah.
these and I appreciate them. I appreciate every single dream. But these are pretty standard dreams that you would expect.
Boring. Move
Um,
on.
not boring, but
No, I'm joking.
important. But they're the same every week. So I always
Yeah.
look for what's changing. Because for me, it's the changes that are so incredibly important. Um, so I actually see a lot of dreams around AI. So a lot of nightmares almost about new robotics cutting into physical bodies they always stick out to me because it's so visceral. And I actually had one of my favorite dreams was this nightmare that somebody had, that they were the AI, that they were trapped and they were like a slave and they had to keep doing something that someone else wanted, but they were trapped inside this box as the AI. And I just thought that was the most beautiful thing. So the way we're working is completely changing. The way the power dynamics between technology and humans is changing. And this is coming through in our dreams. And for me, that's amazing. Oh,
Sorry?
I'll just keep talking. I'll just
Yeah,
keep
no,
talking.
please
It's so
do. Please.
interesting.
Please keep going. No, I'm not going to put a stop on you. This is what we're here to do. I love hearing these stories from yourself.
I really have to watch. Because in my personal life, I just corner people at parties when I do this, and then I have to.
Oh, I can imagine at a party this is going to be the best thing. You're just holding shop in front of so many people on the sofa, just telling you about dreams. It's so
And I
good.
can't escape because it would be rude. So I get this a lot. There are certain figures that come through. Elon Musk. Everyone dreams about Elon Musk. I don't know why we all dream about Elon Musk, but we do. We have sort of what's happening in the immediate outside world will be reflected. So around Easter, we had a lot of very strange dreams around Easter. So a lot of people dreamed of wombs. So a lot of womb imagery, which I really liked. Like a lot of that pagan Easter coming back through. A lot of eggs, of course. A lot of women dressed in pink. Um,
To see
a
even
lot of
then things from your childhood, like those little like simple things that you may not even be prominent now in your life, but just that kind of idea. Okay, this is Easter or this is Christmas, and what that was like for you when you were younger. Because I've had similar dreams. That for me, Easter in the New Age, not so much pagan philosophy or theology, but just things like Easter bonnets. I had a dream around Easter where everyone was just walking around in stupid fancy hats and whatnot. We used to make when we were at primary school in the UK, but I've not seen one in decades.
yeah, yeah, childhood homes again. So many dreams are set in our childhood home. I suppose it's just imprints. It imprints when we're young, and it just forms the backdrop for the rest of your life. Um, this week, everybody was dreaming about crows. I have no idea why everybody was dreaming about crows. I wonder if it's because they're nesting, so they're more aggressive at the moment. So maybe people are dreaming for crows for that reason, or maybe maybe it's some secret message from the universe. I don't know.
Got to throw in both sides. We can't rule it out. Can't rule it out.
With this project, I generally just reflect back. I don't try to analyze in any way. I just pattern recognize. That's all.
It's hard not to though, even at least for yourself. I mean, everyone has it. You don't judge, or at least you don't judge on someone's character based on what you notice. But you see these own patterns within yourself, and if you've noticed a pattern, you're very often more likely to see it elsewhere as well. So seeing them within dream,
Absolutely.
do you get a lot of?
Hmm.
So are these dreams that you're hearing of other people's?
Yes.
What kind of
So I also
geographical? Sorry, what kind of geographical location are these? Are these all? Let's say the crows ones, for example. Is that all
so
people
I
in a closer area, or people all across the world?
I don't track IP addresses deliberately. But
Deliberately, it happens by accident.
oh no, like I don't collect that data. I don't collect that data because I think it's really weird and creepy.
Of course.
But I suppose that was where the question was going. I don't know that. I do know who visits my website, and I run Google ads, so I kind of target certain geographies. So the majority come from London and Amsterdam, um, which for me is another huge challenge in that I recognize two parts around dream work. The first is that different cultures have different ways of looking at dreams, and I have a very westernized approach. So even when I talk about mythology or ancient practices, I'm always drawing from Christianity or from folk stories from England or Scotland. So I recognize that there is a whole world, and I hope that I'll get to meet more people, perhaps in Muslim countries, because I understand they have a very rich history as well around dreaming. Um, I'm always very interested in other cultures, so I speak only from a Western perspective. And the second piece that always challenges me, and I'm not sure what to do with it, is that I'm aware of the socioeconomic bias. Having time to dream, even having enough time to get into those deep stages of sleep that you need for vivid dreaming, and then having time in the morning to think about your dreams and go onto a website and write your dreams. This is such a luxury. So I'm also aware that there is a big strata of society that isn't necessarily included in this activity. So yeah, it comes with a caveat that I'm aware that I'm getting only some people.
Obviously, it's more so again that pattern recognition as opposed to you're not writing a thesis, so you're not as of yet anyway. Who knows in the future? But you're not sort of creating a massive
Oh, never
research
again.
paper for not again, never again.
Not doing a thesis again.
Had too
No
too many
way.
nightmares about those theses. So, what are the differences in dreams culture to culture on the whole that you recognise?
So I suppose I'm not the best person to ask because I really look at a Western culture. But I understand that in collective cultures, they're more likely to have other people in them. We're very individual. We have our own selves. And actually, it prompted me when you mentioned gender because women tend to have other people more often in their dreams, whereas men tend more often to be alone.
Okay, yeah. So that was what the way I looked at it is in terms of it's almost like yin and yang side of things, where you've got one side which is again the Western side is like you just said, you've got that centralized version of the world, centralized ideology of this dream is about me, and it's almost like you're on your mission. It's almost like you are the hero in your movie, and you're on a mission to achieve your goals. And that's where I see it from the dreams that I used to have compared to more of the dreams that I have now, where the Eastern side, very often the Eastern ideology being that bottom up model of a community before it is the individual, where the dreams I have now are very often the case of it's me and a person, and it's more about our connection and what we're doing than it is about what we're actually doing. Is that something? I mean, from what you obviously you say, you're not necessarily the best person to ask. So as of yet, from culture to culture, but is that something you see from male to female? Could you tell us a little bit more about the difference? The differences male to female dreams.
It's really difficult to know whether or not the dream differences are based on our societal norms. So men do tend to have more violence in their dreams. But is that fundamentally about being a man, or is that just because men are more likely to watch maybe movies or play video games, or just be more open to that aspect of their personality? Um, Often women tell me that they have dreams about men attacking them. Is that something particular about being a female, or is it just that we're more open talking about male on female violence and we are talking about female on male violence? Our dreams are a reflection of our waking world. And in the waking world, we have gender differences. Whether or not they're biological or societal, I maybe can't comment. But we live our lives in different ways. We almost live our lives in different worlds. So, of course, our dreaming is different.
So, are the most of the dreams that you hear of and people send to you, do they often center more around negative emotions and positive emotions?
Yes, and that's a little sad for me. And I understand the motivation. If you have a difficult dream, you're more likely to share it with somebody. But I love funny dreams. Like I love the beautiful funny dreams. And I think people sometimes think like, "Oh, what's the point in sharing this? It's just a silly little nonsense." It's so silly, but I love them. I love them so much. I think probably my favorite dream ever this last week. Um, I'm not sure if your listeners know, but we have a celebrity, a national treasure called David Attenborough that we all love. And he is this guy, and he makes documentaries about nature, and he has this very proper English accent. And he comments like the lion is moving across the savannah. Yeah, he's really like a lovely, kind man. Like I'm sure in his personal life, he's kind to all the animals. He's kind to people. I love him. But somebody had this dream that they were going about their normal life, just getting on with their day to day activities. And David Attenborough came and started to narrate their life as if they were the animal in the documentary. Except everything that he said was really mean and like sarcastic and like mocking. And it was really disorientating for them. And maybe it was a horrible experience for them, but for me, it's just so funny. Like, so funny that your brain can come up with that.
It's great that you have to laugh about these things. If you don't, I love the expression, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. As in,
Hmm.
if you can't take a joke about things and you take them all seriously, because if you take them seriously, then they are serious to you. When inherently they just, as you say, they just are. But then if that's not, from me just analyzing from my very rudimental background, sort of rudimental view on dreams, seeing that from what you've just told me about our dreams sort of having whispers and maybe to take notice of the things that we're doing, and often they're nonsensical and unrelated, but to have a almost godlike figure in the UK as David Attenborough to be narrating your life and being so cynical towards you has got to point straight away towards what you may be feeling towards yourself.
That's so interesting that you say that because that's not how I interpreted it.
Okay, how did you interpret it?
So maybe starting off with the Ullman methodology, if that were my dream,
Okay,
I would reflect that I'm being watched, I'm being documented. Maybe like on Instagram, everyone is always documenting their lives. They're always performing to this observer who we think is better than us. Um, and they're kind of mean and we're not really measuring up, but we're always being watched. So I would put it in that category.
oh cool, because that's almost like again a very, for me that's, I say that as a very Western way to look at it, almost like Big Brother, as the Western notion of top down God looking at what we're doing and effectively judging us on what we're doing, which realistically is just ourselves judging ourselves. I love the expression is that what you see is all there is, because you don't know what you don't know. Because if you see it a certain way, again, that Ullman theology, I'm beginning to love, being that it's not so much important what it is, what's important is what you think it is and how you feel about it, if I'm getting that right.
Yes, I think that's why I love the Ullman methodology because there isn't a right, I mean, there's a right way of doing it. The right way to do it is in a way that's not judgmental, mean, or hierarchical. But there isn't an answer. I suppose dreams aren't like that. They're not puzzles. There isn't an answer. They just are.
Just as us, we just are. So,
Yeah, we just are.
would we be able to then, if you're up for it, can we go through this group um, dreamwork framework that Ullman's set forward together with one of the dreams that you have received?
You know what? We can, but I won't. I'll use my own dream because I
Okay,
always feel a little like I don't mind telling them as anecdotes, but I always think diving into someone's dream
it's very personal,
maybe it's not the yeah. It's very
but
personal. And
it's as you say, it's just a dream.
it's just a dream. It's just a dream. And I kind of feel like because the dreams came out of the collective unconscious, everyone's dream kind of belongs to everybody. Like I can be the author of it, but it came from us. So I can share my dream if you like.
Yes, please do, please.
So I had this dream last week. I was in a supermarket. The supermarket was in Los Angeles in LA, and it was the 1950s. And in the 1950s, LA, I don't know if this is true, but in my dream world, LA had just been built. So everything was brand new. They had just built the supermarket. All of the people were dressed like all fancy 1950s, shiny people. And I was in the supermarket and I was with Henry VIII, so the British king. And but not old Henry VIII, young, hot Henry VIII. Um,
Was he ever
y-
hot? Was he ever
yes,
young?
as a young man, he was a very attractive man.
I'm sure
Um,
he would kill anybody who painted an unfriendly
well, when he
portrait of him.
got old, he got a bit not so nice, but when he was young, he was hot. Um, so I was with Henry VIII, but Henry VIII was somehow still the king, even though it was the wrong country and the wrong time. He was still the king, but he had been locked inside his castle, and all of the world had changed around him. And he was in the supermarket, and he was really disorientated. I was working for him, so I was trying to help him navigate this 1950s LA supermarket. And Henry VIII really needed to buy condensed milk. That's the dream.
Sorry, and
That's so, I mean, you can also laugh. This is your experience. It's also your experience.
okay, okay. So I'm getting this right. That you were in a freshly built Los Angeles in the 1950s with a young Henry VIII
He was hot.
in a young hot can't leave out the details. A young hot Henry VIII in a supermarket, and you were trying to help him out to find condensed milk.
He was disorientated.
So you're disorientated. He wasn't just couldn't find
Because
it. He
he'd been
was
in his castles for so long, he didn't know. Like everything was brand new to him because he thought he was still a Tudor king.
got you. Okay, so what was the saying that you have to use before you dove into it?
Oh, if that were my dream, this is how I would have experienced it.
And that's it.
Yep.
And then we go on
Then you
from
just
there.
say,
Okay.
imagine inside you, imagine this was really your dream. Like take the dream and try to feel how it would feel if that was your dream.
I feel regardless of anything else, this will be my dream tonight. So picking that out from the collective. Okay. So if that were my dream, this is how I would experience it. Barring obviously the gender differences between myself and you. So if it were my dream and I experience it that way, I would be feeling starstruck and a little bit fearful. Obviously, what we know from Henry VIII's lifetime, and then also a little bit kind of dubious towards what his true intentions were. Like, what is he actually doing here? Why is he so far away? What's he planning? What's he plotting? He's a very powerful and I assume intelligent person. It couldn't just simply be as simple as he needs condensed milk. It's like, what's he using this for? What's he got planning, basically? And where do I fit into that?
Okay, when you say this,
okay, go on.
it makes me reflect. Because the purpose of you describing it so that I reflect on my own experience of the dream, it makes me reflect that I saw Henry VIII as a victim in my dream, and I was very protective and maternal towards him. And I'm reflecting now that you don't have that experience.
Okay, so do I do the same reflecting thing?
If you have more questions about the dream that would help you better to experience it, you can also ask me more questions about the dream.
Okay, so I did not know that it did not cross my mind to be more sort of concerned about his own of Henry VIII's. Sorry, this seems so bizarre. I'm trying to bring myself back in. It did not cross my mind to be so concerned with Henry VIII's mental well-being, which I'm now reflecting may show something towards something about my view on powerful people.
Okay. When you were living my dream, is there anything that you felt? Like being in the supermarket, perhaps?
It made me feel that, reflecting on it, it felt like he was an old man trapped in a young man's body, and I did want to help him in that way. And I used to work in a supermarket years ago when I was, I think, 16, 17. And often you'd get people coming up to you. Well, you get loads of people come up to you, and being a young 17-year-old supermarket worker stacking shelves, often I didn't really care. I was like, but sometimes somebody would come my way, and for whatever reason, I have no idea, young, old, male, female, I'd just want to help them more than I would other people. So seeing that Henry VIII there, I felt like he was more on that side of I didn't really want to help him as much as I would say somebody else who was there.
Okay, when you say this, it's given me another insight into this dream. I also worked in a crappy supermarket and I hated it.
Which one?
And I also, I don't want to say, I mean, they were a good Tesco's. They were a good employer. If you're going to work for a supermarket, work for Tesco's, I guess.
Don't work for Asda.
Don't work for Asda. Work for Tesco's. Um, and I also, now you're saying this, I reflect that at that time in my life, I had a lot of shame about working in a supermarket and that class differentiation. And I actually hadn't associated that with my dream before, but now I'm like, yeah, I was working in a supermarket and Henry VIII was there. Like, that's a big class, that's screaming class divide at me.
Yeah, that's what I got from it. And reflecting on your reflection, I feel I felt very similar when I was doing that job, but I've also worked different sort of menial and almost somewhat embarrassing jobs to myself personally at the time, which I'm now starting. At the time, I felt embarrassed that I worked at a supermarket, but I kind of chalked it up to needing money. And then I also worked on an egg farm throughout COVID because I didn't have any other options, which was quite possibly the worst job I've ever had in my entire life. And I was embarrassed to tell people for so long because of this. But only more recently am I feeling guilty that I actually saw that as more lower class, quote unquote, than other jobs and professions.
Yeah. Isn't it strange how my dream brought this out? That this shared experience came out in
I
my
love
dream.
this. I love this.
Yeah, I
Oh,
feel closer to you now. Do you only feel closer to me? That we had this weird shame that we couldn't talk about, and now we talked about it.
so I need a moment. Just yeah, it's interesting. I love. Well, I host a podcast. Of course, I love talking to people. I love talking to people from all walks of life who do different things. I'm just curious about a load of different things, and it's very therapeutic for myself. Those environments, whenever you are with somebody and you can speak openly, and you can just not really care what anyone else thinks about, or as you do care, but you don't care enough to judge. If that makes sense. Those things to me are so refreshing. They help to clear out the cobwebs in the mind, in the body, and it's great. And to do that through dreams is something I've not thought of doing beforehand. But fuck, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. What I find sometimes is we didn't really need to have this conversation for the last hour and a half. I could have just hit you with that dream. You could have reflected back, and we could have found that really shared, very intimate point of connection from nothing. I wouldn't have even needed to know your name. I could have just met you at the bus stop, and I could have just been like, hey, this is a weird human experience I had. And then you had it too. And now I'm a little bit less ashamed and a little less guilty because you are also feeling shame.
Yeah, no, seriously, that's something. It's something I figured out for myself through what happened to myself years ago, which I've already touched on a little bit. Is that from that moment onwards, the main thing which was just abundantly clear for myself going forward and how I want to live, not so much how I want to live my life, but I do want to live my life this way, but how I feel I need to live my life is with that unapologetic openness with what I'm saying and what I'm doing, where, like you mentioned and touched on earlier with yourself, you felt like you were almost living a lie with what you were doing previously. And you had to do something that you wanted to do and were passionate about. That, for me, changed my entire life like that. And it's experiences just like me and you have had, which just further prove that point to myself. That when you can live openly and you can speak to people openly about anything, it doesn't mean you have to share everything. It doesn't mean you've got to be an completely open book, but it means that you're at least honest with yourself about how you are and what you feel. And you can be honest with yourself about any guilt and any shame and whether it's right or wrong. You can, and being able to laugh at yourself, not take it seriously, which dreams are perfect for. And then things just generally start to look up day on day, week on week, year on year, because you're not kind of bullying yourself over that guilt and shame.
Yeah, shame will really kill you. It's the worst. It's awful.
It's terrible. Anyway, would you like to hear one of my dreams?
Yes, I didn't want to be intrusive, but that's all I wanted to hear this whole time.
The only reason you came on to talk, because I want to hear your dream. Okay, so there's a lot of blurry details in my dreams, firstly, which... Yeah, so there's a lot of blurry details, which as I talk more, I often kind of jump back and forth because I remember something that I have missed. So I can give a general idea of what a dream was like in terms of an overarching experience, but I do tend to struggle with, because I don't do any dream journaling. I probably will do and try to now after this conversation. But can very I find it difficult to write start to finish how things happened in the first person. So the dream I had last night, actually, which I woke up and I pondered for a little bit, and I was just blown away by. Sorry, was I've got lined up to do a podcast with somebody else, a guy named Josh, and I spoke to him once on the phone just to arrange things the other day, and he was in the dream, and my girlfriend Katie was in the dream, and I was going over to his apartment, but his apartment was in a multi-story parking garage, and I managed to just step into his apartment, and he came in, and he was a little bit freaked out. I was like, "What are you doing in my house? Like, I didn't let you in." Because he wasn't in. I came into his apartment and he wasn't there. But the mic was set up, the camera was set up, and it was all ready for the podcast. But he was like, "Oh, it's okay. I've just got to go and return this jumper. It was a black fleecy jumper to a friend. I'll be back afterwards and we can start." I was like, "Okay, great. But here is a bag of weed to keep you going until I get back." I was like, "Well, okay. This is strange." And then he left. And then I didn't really feel comfortable sitting in his room alone after that situation. So I'd left the weed on the side and I'd stepped outside. But inside this parking lot now, there was a long queue of people queuing around, all queuing up to his apartment door. And I had no idea why, but it kind of freaked me out a little bit. And this wound all the way around. This wound all the way around the parking spots. There was no cars in the parking lot whatsoever. And it went down the tiers all the way around. And I had to kind of escape because then they started chasing me. I was like, "Oh, okay." They started chasing me and I had to go back into the apartment and then sneak out the way that I managed to get in so nobody could see me. That is when my girlfriend Katie, turned up. And she started saying that things had happened and I could not remember them happening. I could not remember them happening to me. But she was explaining them like they just happened 5 minutes ago. And this is where things get a little bit blurry because we were then going through this dream, but then the one thing that was clear was every time that I was fearful and panicky and scared, things then started to escalate and get worse and were a little bit scarier. And then I also have these big chunks in my memory gone. Like I couldn't, so Katie would be the one, like the narrator of telling me what just happened, which I had been there for but missed. And then every time something more positive happened, I was there, I was present, and things started to go in the other direction, almost like they'd scale up more and more. But then that became a realization to myself that every time that I was to do something more altruistic and kinder towards other people, good things started happening to me and the world looked happier. Then every time I did something slightly more deceitful, I would have these kind of time jumps and scarier things would start happening to me in return. And then I woke up.
Okay. Can I ask you some questions to make sure I understand the dream
Yes.
properly?
Yeah, you can. I don't think there's any understanding this dream properly.
The apartment was in a multi-story car park. So was it still
Yes.
inside? Like his apartment was open air, like a multi-story car park, or you were inside?
No, so it was a room in the corner of this multi-story car park in like a middle tier. But there
Okay.
was no other apartment rooms, it was just that one.
And inside, did it look like a car park, or did it look like his house? Like, was it like made up like a
It,
house?
inside it looked like a uni flat, like a general bog standard, like square apartment with
Okay.
a toilet/shower off to the side.
And when you were going into the apartment, did you know you were doing something wrong? Like, did you know you were breaking in?
Yes, because I didn't just enter through the door at the side. I, for whatever reason, because I'd knocked on. Sorry, I knocked on. The door was locked, and then round to the side
Okay.
because of where there was a slope where the cars would come up the multi-story car park.
Mhm.
There was a gap into the apartment there where it kind of went up, so I could get in through
Okay.
there. But there was no one in there
Okay.
at the time.
And you mentioned when he came and he gave you the weed and he had to take his sweater somewhere. You felt like you couldn't stay. Why did you feel like you couldn't stay if he said you could stay?
I felt like I was intruding. I was just in, I don't like.
Okay.
I don't know. I felt like I couldn't be in somebody's space whilst they weren't there.
Okay. What did you think about the gift of the weed?
I thought it was strange because I don't smoke weed. Well, I don't anymore, and I haven't for a while smoked weed. And I was like, I've
Did you
just,
feel grateful?
uh, not particularly. I was having kind of thoughts in my head that is this guy a drug dealer? What's going on? Because I only spoke to him on the phone. I've not actually met him in person yet, and he's giving me this
Okay.
for free whilst he leaves, and I didn't ask for it.
Okay. Sometimes we have an idea about what kind of country we're in the dream. Did you know, okay, what country you were in?
Um, it didn't. It didn't feel prominent, but I guess it felt like the UK because it felt like a parking lot I'd been in before.
Okay. And when you came out, there was this queue of people. Who were these people? Did you recognize anyone?
No, but it almost felt as if they were fans
Oh,
who
the
were
guy.
cute. No, of me who were queuing up to see me.
Okay.
It
Like,
felt
were they
really.
young? Were they old? Were they white? Were they black? Did you see anything?
It was a queue of people as if they were queuing up to buy tickets or something like that, and it kind of wound
Okay.
around.
But they were your fans, but you felt scared of them?
I didn't at the time. I didn't. Oh, it feel from what my recollect from my recollection, it did not feel as if they were. I'll put this. I kind of got the feeling that they were fans, but I didn't know that they were fans.
Okay. Okay. Just if you had to
It's like they
say,
were.
you would say that.
Yeah, it's like they were queuing up to come to see me in the room or
Okay.
to do a podcast with me.
And then you said they chased you.
Well, I opened the door and they kind of all looked at me at once, and then they all started
Okay.
coming towards the door, and I had to go the way that I
Okay.
came out. After I came in, sorry.
Did they want to get to you or did they want to get into the house?
Felt like they wanted to get to me.
In a nice way or a mean way?
Um, in a nice way, but it was still
Okay.
felt very overwhelming.
Okay. Okay. You talked a lot around a parking garage, but you never mentioned a car. Were there any cars?
Nope, not a single one. It was just that kind of feeling of it was in the middle tier, no cars there, but there were lines on the floor. But there was like the
Yeah.
roof and that the concrete bollards, like a traditional concrete parking garage that you'd get in the UK.
Okay. Okay. And then I forgot you escaped and you found your girlfriend.
I escaped, and I feel like because this is where I'm trying to almost piece things
Yeah, I
together.
got a bit
It
funny here.
it it felt like to get to the parking lot, I drove there, and that she was just still waiting for me in the van.
Okay. She was in a van. Okay, now there's a vehicle.
Yes, that's just my van. Yeah, and she was
Okay, your
waiting
real
for
life
me.
van.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, and how did you
she was
feel when you
waiting
saw
for me.
her? You felt safe. Like, how did you feel?
I don't know because I kind of just I was relaxed by that point. It felt like I was relaxed. Like
Okay.
that experience, like that, it was almost like that section of the dream, that whole dream was over, and now this was almost a different dream.
Okay. Okay. And now in this new dream, you kind of are controlling it a little bit. Like if you did one thing, something happened, and if you did something else happened.
Yes,
Okay. Okay. And did you enjoy that? Did you were you aware that you kind of were in control?
I wasn't. aware in the beginning. I was aware afterwards. I did not enjoy that kind of control because it wasn't so much control. It was almost based off how I was feeling more than anything else.
Okay.
If I was
Was
feeling,
Kate
go on, sorry.
was Katie aware of what you were going through?
She was the one that made me aware of what was going on because it was a case of she would explain to me these things that were happening that were negative, which I had apparently blacked out through, and then that part of my memory was gone. And I was like, "What do you mean this just happened? I was right here and it didn't happen." It's like, "Yeah, but you've like we were there the whole time, but I didn't remember it."
Okay. Okay. I think I understand a lot enough. I can reflect now if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
So if that were my dream, this is how I would experience it. I suppose there's two very different halves. The first half for me feels incredibly cold and incredibly like lonely. That was my overwhelming feeling. First, when you go into a parking lot, for me, I see a lot of grey. I see it being kind of dark, like a little scary, like it's not a place you want to be, especially a parking lot without any cars in it, like completely abandoned. There's no one even going to come and collect their car. You're just alone. Um, and then the idea of having a house in that setting, that cold, concrete setting, like the least homey place. So I have a feeling of it being very like lonely and like the opposite of nature. Then for me, the contrast was really clear and a little uncomfortable between you going into an apartment, into someone's home to have a podcast, which is all about communication, and someone refusing that communication and instead giving you drugs, the kinds of drugs that make you quite insular. So, not like a super social drug, like a very closed down drug. It makes me really sad. Like, you came for this and instead you got drugs and you had to go and do something with the fleece. And I think you mean like this, when I imagine it as being that, like, not like a sheep's fleece, like a crappy, like the chemical fleece thing.
Like it was a black like jumper fleece, as if like one that was knitted
Yeah.
almost, and he had to go and return it to
Okay.
someone.
So you were left alone with these drugs, not what you wanted. You wanted a podcast. Um, and then it struck me that you went out into the queue and there were all of these people. And again, this weird dichotomy of they wanted you, they liked you, they were your fans, but there was no communication or you didn't really know what they wanted or why they were queuing. They weren't your friends. It wasn't human interaction. So for me, the first half of your dream just feels really sad.
Okay. It was so most of my dreams always kind of follow a similar idea of they are never overwhelmingly positive or overwhelmingly negative. It is almost always the case of however positive a dream gets, it gets equally negative in some way or
Okay.
another. Just not in terms of, well, yes, what happens, but in terms of the general feelings as well. Where if I get really excited or happy at a certain moment, then at another point in that dream, I will also be then very fearful or paranoid
Okay.
over something different. So it's never, I never really have a dream which is just ultimately sad or really scary. There's always some moments of elation and then some moments of anxiety.
Okay. Okay, then I come on to the next part of your dream. And for me, I was really happy when you spoke about your girlfriend finding you in the van. So for
No,
me,
I
this has
came back to her in the van.
in the van.
She was
This has
waiting.
like
Yeah.
three really big pieces. The first is that it's your van. So before you were in this weird cold place, none of it was yours. It was just weird. But now it's like your van and your girlfriend and you're relieved. And I also feel like the van is like important. Because in the other place there weren't any cars. You couldn't go, like you couldn't move, you couldn't travel. But now you have a van, like you're in control of your van with your girlfriend. Like now you're moving. So for me, even the colors of this part, when I imagined it as my dream, the colors even changed. And whereas before there'd been a lot of grey, I don't know what your van's like, but in my imagining of your dream, it's kind of like a hippie van, like kind of scruffy and patchwork, and like a lot of color. It's okay. This is how I imagined it. Um, yeah. So for me, this initially felt like, okay, this is the end of the dream, the conclusion, the happy ending, like the savior. So I was even surprised when you then continued to talk.
I do that a lot. Continue to talk. Um, yeah, so it's interesting that you say that because for me it felt like I didn't pay. So the more important parts for me, again, like I spoke about previously, were just the people. The parking lot being grey in a dingy and a dark area was never really prominent. It just kind of was the setting. The apartment I was in was, for all intents and purposes, just seemed like a generic lads like uni apartment, like uni room. It was well cleaner if anything. It was a nice normal place. I had the setup there. I had not seen that room beforehand. It wasn't like one of my old previous rooms, or anyway I think I'd been to beforehand. It was the bed was made. It was light. It was blue. There was colours. He had posters up on the wall. I think it was like a Pulp Fiction poster on the wall, something like that, like a classic uni room. And then the concern was because I think I had such a good connection with this person on the phone previously, and I was excited to go. I was excited to go speak to him,
Hmm.
and then for him to just kind of leave was like that. Oh, where are you going? Kind of thing. And then to
Okay.
peer out and see all these people, I was like, oh wow, these people are here to see me, and this is great. Then they all saw me at the same time, and I was like, whoa, that's a bit too much. And then again,
Ah,
seeing my
okay.
girlfriend, the van part wasn't a concern. I was like, the van's the van. I see the van every day. It's our home. We're traveling Australia in our van. For those who are listening, it was more so the fact that she was there and she was helping to make sense of things which were kind of unapparent to myself.
Okay.
It's the way I look at it.
Okay. For me,
Yeah,
the second half of your dream makes my stomach lurch. Like all of that, like this happened and then this happened and you couldn't remember. Like it made me feel a little like I was on a roller coaster, like a little sick.
yeah. That is exactly what I felt at the time because that was the point I woke up, and that
Yeah.
was so. This was something. This is something I haven't actually told anyone about really. But so during the sort of experience I had back a few years ago, I had that kind of awakening experience. The one thing I got was how my actions and my feelings will dictate the world around me.
Mm.
So if I am feeling good, I'm feeling positive, I'm feeling happy and healthy, then everything would be kind of more colourful and be happier and people will be nicer in response to me. That again, go back to that Pygmalion effect that I'd mentioned previously,
Mm-hmm.
but that was the sciencey side. But in reality, the experience is if I come up to you smiling and happy and positive, you're likely to be smiling, happy and positive to me. But if I'm feeling negative, if I'm feeling scared, if I'm feeling like I've done something untruthful or deceitful, and I take that embodiment over to a conversation with somebody or to an experience, then the response so I'm shut off to the world is shut off to me. And that's when things get darker and scarier and I'm more confused and I'm not as receptive. And the dream felt very much like a reenactment or a reliving of that experience.
Okay. It was reflecting back your worldview to yourself,
Mm.
but in like kind of like a cartoony way.
In a very kind of almost at the time it felt sci-fi. It felt like it was
Okay.
a very fictional way.
It's interesting to me that when you talked about your philosophy earlier in this call, it felt like a very wholesome, like warm, like I really like appreciated that worldview. But now when you describe it in the dream, to me it sounds like a very scary worldview.
That was something for me that took a very sort of longish time to process and deal with, because it was at some points very very positive. It was very great, very
Hmm.
wholesome, and it shows the potential of the world can be very amazing, very wholesome, incredible place to live in. But on the other hand, it can also be very scary and very terrible and horrible to live in. And
Yeah.
that realization for me was that the common denominator is how I see it. Some people can look at some people see a glass half full, some people see a glass half empty. I
Okay.
can't necessarily control my emotions. I can't necessarily control how I see things, but I can take a moment to almost not see them, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Take a step
How
back
did
and not get involved in that and not let that be the narrative.
how did you experience me borrowing your dream?
It felt fine. It felt fine.
Okay.
Again, if we had this conversation 5 years ago, I can't imagine the universe bringing us together 5 years ago. But it would have been a very, I can imagine it being a very kind of get out of my space kind of
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
But I find it great to kind of, I'm a true believer in that people will find a way and to connect, and that everyone's
Mhm.
at their root the same.
Yeah. Yeah, when the time is right.
So I felt fine. It felt, if anything, it felt very sort
Okay.
of freeing.
Okay. Indeed, this is why I like the Elmo methodology, because sometimes when I've taken dreams to people who are more maybe Freudian, it feels a little like, indeed, like fuck off. Like you don't know. It feels a little like theft.
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that being the case. But anyway, sorry, we have just gone over the 2 hour mark. And as much as I could talk with yourself, Emily, for a long, 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 long time, the batteries in my light are actually dying,
Yes.
and it is getting
I
dark
wonder if you
outside. I don't know if you've
noticed that
noticed.
well, actually, I was just thinking the opposite. When we started in Amsterdam, it was still dark, and the sun has just come up, and now it's incredible. Like the lighting in my face has
Yeah,
shifted.
you are in a beautiful streak of sunlight right there. So you're making that streak of sunlight so beautiful, Emily.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, you're going in tonight. We're coming in today.
Yes, I am in Australia for those listening and watching. Emily is in Amsterdam, as she's already mentioned. So just the last thing I try to ask everybody, if I remember, is
Okay.
just, it's quite simple, but it's not that simple. 3 things, just 3 things that you wish the world would know.
Huh. Okay. Your dreams are important. Your dreams are connected. It's okay. You have enough time.
Perfect. I love that. That time one's amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Anyway, Emily, I would gladly have you on any time, any day in the future to just talk more about dreams. I'll be sending you messages all the times like, right, well, Emily, what does this mean? Emily, am I broken?
No, never, never, never. That's the answer. Never.
But it's been absolutely phenomenal. I love you to pieces. The floor is yours. Where are you going to be? I know you've got this conference coming up. Where and when is it? And how can others find you and send over their dreams themselves? The floor is yours.
Yes. So please do find me. Theweekindreams.com is spelled exactly as it sounds. Theweekindreams.com. You can find all of the dreams I collect, but you also can find links to my Medium page, so you can read more in depth about some of these theories that I spoke about today.
Please do go over to the Medium page. That's how I came across Emily, and you will not regret it. She's got some amazing insights into a lot of the things that we've spoken about and a lot of things that we haven't managed to touch on yet either. And do you know what, the one thing I forgot to talk about, which I had in my mind wanting to, we'll have to save it for another time.
Mm-hmm.
Lucid dreams. Lucid dreams.
Okay, I got some views on lucid dreaming. Okay, but another time.
Shall we carry on? Shall we carry on? Have you
Okay,
got
you want
time?
to carry on? I've got time. I
Have
mean,
you got
yeah,
time?
we haven't even. I've got time. Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we're not even in the working day yet over here. So what? Like, tell me your questions. Tell me your experiences with lucid dreaming, maybe.
That's better. So I've just managed to fix the light. So lucid dreaming, in my
Yeah.
experience, and from what I've seen beforehand, from my knowledge, I've only lucid dreamt once. Oh, sorry, it's a car going past. I'm gonna have to edit that out. So, to my knowledge, I have only lucid dreamt once, maybe twice, but it was in such a way that I was lucid dreaming. I realized that I was lucid dreaming, but I still could not control what was going on in the dream. I just realized that I was in it, but then it carried on happening. The question I have for yourself is, one, have you lucid dreamt? Do you try to lucid dream, or do you just kind of let your dreams be themselves? And two, if anybody wanted to, one, how do they? And two, should they?
Okay, so it's relatively easy actually to learn how to lucid dream if you have the time to spend. Basically, you get into the habit in your waking life of questioning reality. So, how do I know this is a dream? Just ask yourself that question. How do you know it's a dream? Sometimes I look at my hands. People often look at their hands, or they look at the clock, or you just get into this habit. Just so it starts to be like clockwork. How do I know I'm not dreaming? And you'll have your own method of doing that. And eventually it'll start to happen in your dreams. And maybe a couple of times you know you're dreaming, but you can't control it, but you'll get better and better. Yeah, it's relatively simple. There are a lot of how-to guides online. In the past, when I had a less grateful view of my dreams, when indeed I saw my dreams as something I had to do in the nighttime, a big waste of time where I wasn't doing my job, I indeed did lucid dream. I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but I basically was using lucid dreaming to fulfill base desires. Like I was just doing stuff I couldn't do in the daytime. It was very like it was not a spiritual practice. Um, it's not a spiritual practice. It was just like okay, let me just have these parties in my dreams. Um, I have heard that other people use lucid dreaming in a much more growth-minded way. So I understand that people have used lucid dreaming to get to very, very deep forms of meditation, or to meet people from their past who perhaps have passed along and that they want to have some kind of dialogue with to sort of get it out of their system. Whether or not you believe a person is truly visiting you from the death, I think is irrelevant. For them, it's a way to process what's been unsaid. So I do understand that people have used it for spiritual practices. Perhaps controversially, at this point in my life, and actually in the last 2 years since I got this gratitude for my dreams and this respect for my dreams, I have deliberately not lucid dreamt. It comes sometimes. Sometimes in nightmares, I become lucid and I wake myself up. But I would rather not lucid dream. The reason being is that, yes, I think that your dreams are part of you that wants what's best for you. Um, and I think that we're so used to always being in control and always having a plan and a goal and thinking we know best. I think it's okay sometimes that the dream takes you where the dream wants to take you, and you have that trust that that it will give you what it needs to give you. I always feel a little bit regretful when I wake myself up out of nightmares because perhaps it needs to complete. Perhaps the cycle just needs to close and I need to see what I need to see. So, mixed. I will say that I don't lucid dream and it's not something that I want for myself, but also I understand other people find it very useful.
Yes, yes, that is something that resonates with myself a lot. With in terms of lucid dreaming, it's something, of course, everybody would love to just fulfill their base desires when they first gain the capabilities of lucid dream. What else are you gonna do? You're gonna go over to your crush. You're gonna go to the parties you could never go to. You're gonna do all the things that you could ever want to do in the real world, just aimlessly with no repercussions. You're going to do, and there's no shame in that. It's just what people like to do. But then coming into that, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Relinquishing controls or releasing our grip on our minds, releasing that grip on our minds. For me, that's been a very therapeutic resolve for any issues that I've ever had. Is that okay? I may not be able to control this. I possibly could control it if I tried, but then again, for what reason would that be? Why do I want to control it? It reminds me so much of an Alan Watts quote. I don't know if you know Alan Watts.
I love him. I love him almost as much as I love Montague Almond.
I love this. He has one speech about the golden goody, which you've probably heard already. So the idea is that, let's say every night you went to sleep and you could dream whatever you wanted to dream. You're obviously alluding to lucid dreaming, but you may not be aware of as aware of lucid dreaming then. So every night you could go and you could do whatever you wanted. You could go and fulfill your wildest desires, your wildest dreams, and you could do that over and over again. Every single night you went to bed, you could control your surroundings. And you would do that, and that'd be great for so long. But eventually you're going to get bored. Eventually it's not going to feel great because you can control it. You don't have anything that's going to confuse you or nothing to keep you curious. So the next night you go to sleep, you ask for a surprise. Everything's still safe, everything's still secure, you've still got your riches, you've still got the partner of your dreams, and everyone still worships you like a god, blah, 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 blah. But now you ask for a surprise. And you get given a surprise, and it's like, whoa, this is amazing. And then the next night you ask for another surprise. And so on and so forth, or eventually you keep asking for things to be slightly different and uncontrolled by yourself. Until eventually you're just dreaming of real life. Where you have no control, you have no idea what's going on. And it's scary, it's fearful, but it's exhilarating, and you can feel passion, you can feel love, you can feel fear, you can feel a whole array of emotions, which when you've got that control, you can't. And then when coming across that speech for myself, that was kind of like one of those holy shit kind of moments. It was like yeah, you're right. If I could control things, what would I want to do with that control? Why would I want to do that? Why would I want that control? And more importantly, what would be the repercussions of that control? To the point where really you just get, you don't want it. You don't want that. You don't want what you want. So that, again, that lucid dreaming, obviously it's got its place, and I can imagine it being fucking really fun at times. But again, seeing things as an opportunity, like you're saying, like even nightmares, seeing the scary and the negative things as opportunities to grow, as opportunities to learn something about yourself, as opportunities to widen your horizon, is an absolute superpower when you can bring in that all-encompassing view of that. I don't know how to finish that.
Yes, but actually also really great training for your waking life. Just to wake up in the morning and also say, okay, give me what you're going to give me. I can't control this. It's going to come. And it's usually not so bad.
Yeah, usually. I mean, every cloud has a silver lining. Just to bring it in really cringily. But anyway, yes, my light is about to die.
Okay.
But Emily, again, thank you. I've absolutely so thoroughly enjoyed talking to you today.
Me too. Yeah.
For everyone out there, check out Emily Cook, PhD. You can find her on Medium. Search Emily Cook, and you've got weekindreams.com where you can send over your own dreams and hopefully have a conversation where you can go through a similar dream work practice that we did on the podcast today and experience it for yourself. That'd be great. Awesome. Emily, thank you.